kind of overarching thought that Rhule was talking about was being competitive in these individual position rooms and versus sort of guys seeking out better opportunities in the transfer portal. And I've been a proponent that Nebraska needs more competitive rooms, going back to like the Pelini days when I felt like they couldn't find a backup quarterback to push Taylor Martinez. But at the same time, I do understand the desire for guys to want opportunities. And so I'm kind of conflicted here because it's hard to have both, right? It's hard to have competitive rooms with good guys in it and still understand that guys want opportunities to play if they think they're able to. Like, I don't really know what to do with that in order to move forward if you're in Nebraska, if that makes sense.
Well, it's the same problem everybody else faces. So you just have to figure out how you want to attack it. If some of it isn't trying to convince people their opportunity to more consistent playing time isn't through things like special teams or maximizing individual opportunities that they get. I know he's no longer with the program, but I think Mekhi Bayer is a good example of what the staff is willing to do if a guy shows in practice and shows on special teams that he can help out. I mean, he immediately went from
Yeah, that's how they
intriguing
count.
special teams intriguing special teams player to helping on that 2023 defense to having a role in 2024. Now, ultimately, he left in the portal. I can't speak as to why he did that, if it's a change in the coaching staff or whatever, but grass wasn't greener in Missouri either. So I guess the idea, though, behind it is a player like Mekhi Bayer or someone in that situation can own whatever opportunities that they have in front of them. The staff has shown that they're willing to play. Another example who went into the portal, who had a big weekend himself here, James Williams. I mean, if you show this staff through practice, through your opportunities, that you deserve an opportunity, then they're going to find a way to get you on the field. I don't know that there's much more that they can do than that. Obviously everyone wants to play as soon as they can and wants to contribute as soon as they can. Some are more ready to do that than others. It's up to the coaching staff to determine how much of a loss are you taking if this guy's on the field and he's getting his feet wet, and can you survive that? And how many plays can you survive that? Now, that's all part of the calculus of being a coach.
Interesting. I can't wait until you brought up James Williams, and we spent all of 60 seconds, right? I said, oh, just a little bit of emotional immaturity, and you're going to get that when guys come and go. It's just, I think the most disappointing thing to me about the James Williams situation is the fake outrage from adults that are bothered by it. I get the fans, but like, it's kind of a nothing burger, right? In the grand scheme of things. I mean, it's so fluid.
I just think people have to
With
get
guys
used to it.
coming and going, I just like, come
Yeah.
on, like let's just move on.
It's going to happen, a few times a transfer cycle where someone's going to leave and he's going to talk well about his new program. And to do that, he might say things that aren't reflective of what actually happened at his old program. And I just think everyone has to move on from it. Honestly, the person who I would have the strongest reaction to was I don't think Terrence Knighton needed to weigh in at all, frankly.
Yep.
That's
And I
that's
thought
it.
he got up.
That,
Of
that was
all
the
the
only
fake
person.
outrage, Knighton got off scot free.
That was the only person who I'm like, this isn't. Nobody needed this. It's only added to what was dying out, anyways. But I don't think it's that big of a deal. I just think it's a spring nothing burger, as you said. So, and I just think this is going to happen. And if we, how many guys have come to Nebraska and talked about, oh, how great it is here relative to where they were? Like it happens. This is just what's going to be a thing.
We just heard a coach.
Yeah, Dana
Holgerson reference a couple of players and ask them about the situations they were coming from, right? It's the exact same thing.
Yeah. So I just don't know that we need to spend a lot of time being upset or even critically analyzing what was said there. It's a guy who had a microphone in front of him.
I didn't just do that. I'm sorry. I'm going to move on from that. I'm not going to be childish. Mike J, I got some questions, though, and I always like asking you these things because your needle is just kind of pens, right? Like you can, okay. So I just feel like there's this foreshadowing about competition and playing multiple guys on defense. And he said, we got 4 or 5 safeties that could start. We have 6 corners. I want to be multiple. I want to play a lot of guys. how quickly or how intentional is it that you think that he keeps reminding us that this is the direction that this particular defense is moving in?
Well, there's a lot of facets to it, right? You have the portal, so if there's guys that you don't want to see go in this week that you think have a real opportunity to help you next fall, you want to get them through this period of time in which they at least feel like there's the opportunity there. So you're addressing that on the front end of it, and that might be the biggest aspect of all of it. There's the idea that at least crackpots like me hold that there's some younger players in the secondary that are going to take time away from people we've seen take a lot of snaps over the last few years. That just because you're a veteran and just because you have the reps doesn't guarantee that you're going to continue to play the lion's share of them. So there's that aspect too.
I think
Oh,
that was the biggest, but I did not think of the don't get in the portal thing though. So
I don't know that that's as is often discussed. Things that come out of the stadium over there and out of press conferences and quotes all have a general purpose that sometimes extend beyond just the face value of it. So saying, yes, we like a lot of our players and we're going to play a lot of them. Well, there's truth to that, but there's also other meanings to it too. And I suspect one of them is, hey, there's going to be opportunity here for you. Don't just assume that wherever you land right now on the depth chart means that you're never going to be able to play. And so I think things about Matt Rhule is if you listen early before the spring started, he told us a lot of what he already liked about the team before the spring began. And if you go back to the defensive back specifically, and I don't remember who in the media asked the question, but I think it was Brian Christopherson, so I'll just give him blank credit on it. But I I think the way that Rhule answered it showed you how much they like what they have in that room, showed you that they like what they've evaluated in that room, that they don't have all the information that they want about some of these players. So they want to keep a bigger defensive back room because I suspect, think there's going to be some hits coming and they want to receive them and not allow them to end up somewhere else and find that success. So I think that the defensive pack picture is going to remain relatively unclear even after we get out of this portal, even after we get out of the spring, even as we through summer. I can see that as a position room where the guys who play in September aren't necessarily the ones that are finishing the things out in November in Big Ten play. I just think there's a lot of movement that's going to occur in the secondary.
So, Shafe, what you just said there about young guys taking snaps in the secondary, about guys starting in September versus the guys that are going to start in November, that's the exact reason why I was surprised DeShon Singleton came back, if I'm being totally honest with you. And I know you didn't name any names there, I am. But that's the guy that I think about where I go, okay, he was okay for stretches. There were stretches where I felt like he didn't play as well. And I think there's a lot of guys back there that can, I think, replicate what he does already and perhaps with some seasoning pass up in terms of consistency what he brings to the table. I was kind of surprised that he rolled the dice there because I'd be surprised if there were any guarantees about his playing time.
Yeah, and I don't know that there are guarantees about his playing time, but I also don't know that he's returning to the same role that he left. And so they mentioned that he's someone that could have a bit of a different role. And so does that mean he's playing more in an Isaac Gifford spot? Is he playing more on the second level? Is there a way to utilize his athleticism? I don't think he's an NFL safety. So is there a way that he can expand his skill set where he's going to look more attractive for teams in the future? So I think Nebraska looked at it as, hey, this is a mutually beneficial thing, and we can see if we can extract more value at a different spot with a guy that we'd be comfortable if he has to play in a pinch where he'd played the previous couple seasons for us. So I almost look at it where for them it was a sort of a no-brainer. Like, this is someone that they like him personally. They've invested time in him over the last couple of years, but they still wonder if there's more for him out there on the football field or different ways that he can be utilized. And the thing about DeShon Singleton is he's a pretty, to me, he's always come off as he's got a lot of humility, pretty humble team guy. Like, if he's asked to play in a different role, he's going to attack it with everything he has. And so I think part of it is the personality of who came back too. If he was someone that they were worried about, oh, he's going to want this or he's going to need that, I don't know that the door would have been as open as it was.
Yeah, I that's man, that's pretty good. Like, because there's a couple of things in there. I like the fact that you talked about the versatility in his role, but he's also well received too. Where
He's very well liked over there. I don't know if that comes across in the media setting. He's easily one of the better interviews that you're going to get because he's thoughtful. He puts time into his answers. He's genuine. You know, you're not getting a quick canned response. I think he's probably the closest to what MJ Sherman was in a lot of ways, where you get a really thoughtful, thankful individual. I think DeShon Singleton knows there's a lot of ways that college football could have went for him that didn't include playing Big Ten football at Nebraska, and so I think he's ultimately appreciative of that, the way that doesn't always come across with other players. I don't mean that as a good thing or a bad thing. That's just from my own experience talking to him over these last 3 years. That's a guy who's really happy to have found what he did here in Lincoln.
Yeah, it would be easy for me, like on a personal note, to want to be selfish, right? Like, don't come back or go or.
Mm-hmm.
But I also love the fact that if Caleb can play the post safety, I'm just using him as an example because this is something I actually know. Can play the post safety, and then play the rover spot, right? Which D Singleton plays, because you want your top 5 or 6 DBs out there. The fact that Buford and Singleton are guys that can not only encourage and pull along, like, hey, come on, young fella, this is how you have to do it, and it allows those guys to be versatile in their role, the team wins, right? Like everybody wins. So I think the attributes that you're describing, Schaefer, about Singleton are, I think, exactly how this team is going to build from the bottom to the middle to the top going forward. I think you're 100% spot on.
Well, this is a unique situation too, because I don't think anyone expecting into last year that his eligibility was just going to magically come back.
Plays, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if we're being honest, that was a sticking point throughout half the season. I don't think that's no secret,
especially with him and Gifford.
So I'm very fascinated what that looks like when we get to the Cincinnati game. And again, I just think there's a lot of variations that this defense can go through. And I think this, we'll see what this lands on, but I think patience is going to be required for Nebraska's defense in 2025. I don't think it's going to be the sort of unit that finished out 2024, the type of team that was able to shut down Iowa for what it was. It's going to be a different defense, and it's going to take a little bit of time for them to find themselves, find their best 11, find their best rotations.
And it may be situational, right? Like sometimes you may want
absolutely
hyphenated Trent or Javen Wright or Stanger, or I'm missing one inside.
Well, think about 23 when they were sometimes at their best.
Oh, Shavers, right? Shavers, or multiple D line. Like, what if you want to go speed rush, and so you go a little lighter, quicker, or you could use an Ochoa versus I think their ability to match personnel situationally, I think they really, really want to be a strength.
Well, it was in 23. That's kind of what I was saying. And then in 24, they largely stuck with their guys in a way that 23, they played like 25 defensive players. It was a large number. And some of that was just figuring out what you have, and it's a new coaching staff and all of that. But they're kind of back in that again. You have a new defensive coordinator. You have new assistant coaches. You have guys that are doing it for the first time at this level. And so I think there's a period of trial and error, and that's kind of why I think patience is going to be needed with this defense, and that whatever it looks like at the start, allow yourself the idea that it can definitely improve over time. Or maybe it comes out like gangbusters and they have to figure out how they're going to be able to do that week in and week out. So there's just a lot of different ways defense can go.
Schaefer, as we talk about sort of balancing things on as we observe very little bits and pieces of spring and hear from coaches, how are you sort of processing through this? Hey, we really like the defensive line and how they're playing, but the offensive line might be our strongest unit so far. Like those two things are obviously opposing each other in terms of on the actual football field. But how do you kind of balance those two narratives that both of those can be good?
Yeah, it's just given me consternation this spring because the part of me that wants to buy in entirely on the offensive line recognizes that they're not going against what Nebraska had for the last couple of years up front defensively. And I think both can absolutely be true in different ways than just, oh, it means that they're going to be really good up front on both sides of the ball. They might really like depth and the way the guys beneath are emerging, but it doesn't necessarily mean that the top end has stretched itself to a new level. They might like the way that some of these guys have gelled and play together immediately on the offensive line, or that there's more options at each position than maybe they would have expected coming into the spring. Um, so there's different ways that this can all play out. I think with the general sense that I've gotten is they like the individuals that they have up front defensively. There's an acknowledgement that it might take a little bit of time for it all to come together, but their potential is really, really high. And if the offensive line comes along and is playing well and it can handle its business next September, Nebraska is going to be a better offense for it. So it's hard for me to get too far over my skis on what we've heard with the offensive line, but I think it's good. And I think it also kind of tracks because they built and they like a lot of those young guys, and now they're getting their opportunities to see what they are. And we'll see what the actual formation kind of looks like as we get into the summer.
Yeah, it's kind of exciting. I kind of, because what I'm hearing you say is you have a better feel of what you think the offense will look like at this point, even with O-line moving pieces, than you do the defense.
Absolutely.
But that's probably more. I don't want to lead it. Is that more because you think the defense has more or more range? Or because they have newer, you're starting with Dylan and working out, and he's probably the most known commodity.
I think you have a little bit more known commodities with Dylan and Emmett Johnson and a general idea of what those guys look like, even when adding in the pieces at wide receiver that are different, even when acknowledging that you had however many starts walk out the door with Bryce Benhart and Ben Scott and experience with Mazuka and all of it. But when you look at the defense, and I mentioned that everything is sort of different. There's pieces that look the same, but they might play different. They might be asked to do different things. They might have different strengths than they have in the previous two seasons. They're getting different instruction. The idea, the concepts, the goals are largely going to be similar, but how they get there may look different than what we've seen in the past. So because of that, I feel like I have a better understanding or a better feel or more confidence, whichever of these three phrases you want to use, in what's happening on the offensive side of the ball. But I acknowledge that there's a lot of upside for them defensively too. It doesn't, just because it looks different or it sounds different doesn't mean it has to go poorly. There's just different ways that they can get to the result that they want than what we've seen so far.
I wonder how many times how they're gonna benefit from guys that have the opportunity that leave to stay because it's good for both versus they're coming back because they don't have anything else to do. Because you can build your program on the first part. Like a guy like Singleton, who's going to be a fantastic tester, really gifted athletically, but maybe he thinks, heavy safety-laden draft. Nebraska's been really good. This is a place that can continue to develop me. That's a good thing versus somebody that just that sticks around or wants to stick around because they have nowhere else to go. And I think while Nebraska's trying to build a program, Schaefer, where you don't want to leave, if you can get to the point where you have enough self-awareness to say this is the better place for me, that's how you can beat the portal. Like, I'm just piecing together all the stuff that I hear those guys say and Coach Rhule and the portal and the right information and how they're trying to build this team with pending roster constraints, whenever that is, versus the methodology of the culture. They seem to be coming together, or is that just me?
Well, you have a better view of it, and certainly you have the ability to talk to someone who's inside of that culture in a way that, the rest of us don't.
Got boundaries.
But I think there's definitely tenets of truth to that, but some of it hasn't always the goal been to build a program where when people leave, they're leaving for something better or they're leaving for what they perceive to be better. And when Nebraska was at its apex and guys were able to leave as juniors, you were able to survive it, not because they were going somewhere else to play in college football, but because they were leaving to go play in the NFL. Like that was the goal. That was ultimately what you were building. And so I think you want to be able to build a program who's able to withstand when good players move on, because that's what college sports are. It's obviously we're in weird times where eligibility has been stretched to the ultimate limits, but the goal of Matt Rhule and the goal of what they're trying to do over there is to give guys, whether it's 3 years to 5 years, the opportunity to better themselves and to move on to the NFL or the UFL or whatever it is that's next for them. And if some of them happen to leave a little early to go to a different college program, you're still working towards what you ultimately want, which is to put them in a position where they're leaving better than when they came, and then to have the next piece ready to go for it. So the idea isn't what's going out the door; it's building up what's behind them that's ready to go. That's next.
I want to get to a point. I hear you, I do, but I want to get to a point where we're not bothered by Brandon Jackson leaving or what James Williams says. Like, I like your answer. It's the most optimistic of what you're.
I don't know that
it
everyone is bothered by
it
that,
seems
though.
very practical over Nebraska's tenure because they haven't won enough games.
Well, I think there's this idea sometimes, and it's not everybody, but there's people in the fan base that have a tough time understanding why you wouldn't want to be a Husker forever. So there's that. And how many different times, whether it's Cam Jurgens to Malik Collins to Vincent Valentine, where it's you leave early, oh, no one's going to draft them. They don't have a chance in the draft. And then they go on day 2 or high on day 3, and then they're there in the NFL and carving out a career and blah, 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 blah. But that's not everybody in the fan base. That's just a small section of people who have a tough time acknowledging that there's something beyond Nebraska in football. And so you look at the best programs, they lose guys to go to the NFL early, and they withstand it because they're building behind them. So it's not what's leaving you, it's what you have ready to go in the chamber. That's always been the difference maker in college athletics. You want to get to the point where your players are good, that they have the opportunities. If that's not the goal, then I don't really understand what it is that you're trying to build. So the idea is to have program in which you're doing things in a direction that when someone does go and a player is good enough, like let's say Dylan Raiola is good enough to leave as a junior, and we know what that conversation is going to be when that happens. Hopefully Nebraska put themselves in position through a combination of recruiting and building up the roster that whoever they turn to at quarterback finds Nebraska in a far better manner than Dylan Raiola did in 2024. But that's ultimately what you want, right?
Good stuff there, Schaefer, as always.
See, it's. I mean, I'd rather ask you, Mike. You're not as concerned with our boundaries.
All right. I mean, we don't quite have the same relationship that you and Caleb do, but we can work towards that. That can be a goal of ours.
I tell him I'd much rather talk to functioning adults.
Breaking news: Schaefer does not have a child on the team. This is what we learned today. Schaefer, we appreciate. Not yet.
He's still got a chance at a good baseball player. My options.
We'll see.
Out there winning sack races at PBA though, so we don't know. It could happen anytime now. Schaefer, we appreciate the time as always. We'll talk soon.
Great stuff.
All right, guys. Have a good one.